Hello, my name is Arne Belser and today I want to talk about a somewhat complex example of creating your own custom Elementor widget. The topics we're going to discuss will be focused around constructing the PHP class of the plugin, which contains the widget, and also creating a two-way data stream between the JavaScript frontend and the Elementor backend. Let's look at an example. So in Elementor, you have a image slider element. As you can see right here, I've put some slides in there. I've did some styling, and I can go through the slides like this, or I can go like this. This is great and all, but Elementor also has an option to put a slider on the background of your section or container in the newer Elementor versions. So right here I have a container. This used to be a section, but I think after Elementor 3.7 it changed. You can also put a slideshow right here, as I've done, but there's one thing missing. There's no controls. So right now I can have a slideshow, but I have no way of controlling them. So I decided to create my own widget, which is a standalone slide navigation widget. And it works simply by putting it in there. The styling is at the moment not customizable, but by putting it in there, it will look for the closest slideshow swiper instance, and you can control it like this. Or if you, it doesn't work like this at the moment. You can also do another thing, and that is if you have the section settings open, advanced, you can give it a CSS ID. I will call it slider 1. In my standalone widget, I can put enter ID on yes. Right now, because it doesn't find header image, it's done. I can put in slider 1, and it will find the swiper instance, and I can scroll through it. So that's what we're going to make. It will be a mixture of PHP and JavaScript talking to each other. And I think it will be a great example to learn some advanced Elementor techniques. All right, let's dig into it. So I've created a folder, standalone slideshow nav, which will be the root folder of our plugin. First of all, we're going to create the categories. The Elementor category like this. Create a new file, widget categories.php. We'll open the PHP tag, and in there we'll write a function and Elementor widget categories. It will accept an elements manager. With that elements manager, we'll add a category. The first option will be our category slug. I'm going to call this YouTube tutorial widgets. And then we have an array with optional parameters. The title of the category will be YouTube tutorial widgets. Let's make this translatable in our text domain. Oh, too many quotes. Text domain will be YouTube, like this. And we have an icon. I'm gonna use the e-icon theme builder. And don't forget to close the PHP brackets. I have one thing to say about the icon. I tried using Font Awesome icons here, but they don't work. You have to manually include Font Awesome, I think, then within your plugin root folder. And to get over that hurdle, I'm just going to use Elementor icons. You can Google these. And to finish, we have to couple this into Elementor elements categories registered. And then we have our function name. Voila. Right now this won't work because we don't have a running plugin yet, but this is how we add our own custom category. This is optional and not necessary at all, but I wanted to show it because it's pretty cool. All right, now let's get to the bread and butter of our plugin. to actually run our plugin, we need to create a class which can be instantiated and run. So to do that, we make a new one, and I'm gonna call it the same as the folder name, standalone slideshow nav.php. In there, I'm gonna open PHP tags. We need to create the slideshow nav. And a browser, okay. The text domain I'm gonna use standalone slideshow nav. I'm also gonna edit this right here because YTT is a bit ambiguous. All right. So by doing this, our plugin can be recognized by the WordPress plugin scheduler, and we are free to write our class. First, I'm going to copy something in to have some protection against direct access of the files. I'm going to include our widget categories.php file we made, so that also runs. So we have a custom category, and then we write our class. Final class standalone slideshow nav. In here, I'm gonna write some constants just to easily edit versions or minimum Elementor versions, etc. So const version is 1.1.0. Const minimum Elementor version is 3.0.0. Const minimum PHP version is 7.2. Then we need a static variable in which we can contain our instance, so we don't create multiple instances of the same plugin. And I'm just gonna copy over how we instantiate the instance. This should be common knowledge if you're developing widgets. So it will see if the instance is already created. If not, it will make a new instance out of itself, or otherwise it will return the created instance. Then we will write a constructor, public function construct, in which we will load our plugin extensions, text domain, sorry, which is this one. Oh, sorry, I'm wrong. This is the internationalization function. Not construction, we're actually gonna load our plugin. So once the plugins are loaded, we want to call a function in this class on plugins loaded. Let's create that function. We're going to do a check if this is compatible. Don't worry, is compatible, isn't written yet, is compatible. Then add action Elementor init. On the Elementor init action, we will do this init. So we have two more functions to write. All right, so we got another function to write. First of all, let's write the is compatible function. To do some compatibility checks, we will do the following. Is compatible. This is a hard word to write for me. Compatible. This one I'm just gonna copy over from a plugin I already wrote, and I will give some advice. So first of all, we check if the action Elementor loaded has run. If not, we will put an admin notice that Elementor is not running. Let's do that. Also, copy pasta. So we see if the active getter is the query parameter is set in the URL. If not, we will tell them that Elementor requires to be installed via the admin notices hook. Next off, we will check for the required Elementor version. If this one is below version 3.0.0, we will print also a message which will tell the user that they need to update their Elementor version. So Elementor requires the plugin requires Elementor version more. And then last but not least, we require PHP version 7.2. If not, error message is printed. This just makes sure that when users complain, we know that they are using the specifics we required. All right. Next, we had to create another function. This is called init. The init function I will write underneath here because the is compatible is a bit less important for me. So public function init. First of all, we load our text domain. This is the internationalization function we wrote before. And after that, we're going to add some plugin actions. First action we will do we will register the widget, so it's Elementor widgets registered. In that we will run the init widgets method. We still have to write that, of course. All these hooks can be found in the Elementor documentation. The Elementor documentation has been updated quite good the recent months. Some things aren't really well documented, but these things are, so that's if you don't understand, you can check it there. Next, we will register some controls. We're not going to use that in here, but I will show you. So it's controls registered. We're not going to create our own controls, but if we wanted, we could create controls. Then we're going to register the widget styles. Add action, Elementor Frontend. I hope I'm not making any typos, or I will have some serious debugging to do. Widget styles. And dyslexia is working at it. Register widget scripts. Action. Enter content. After register scripts. It's widget scripts. Now we have some functions to write. First of all, the public function init widgets. In this function, we will require our widget, which we haven't made yet. So we're going to require from the dir widgets, and we're going to call it let's call it slideshow navigation .php. With this, our widget has been registered, and now we can load it into Elementor. So we do Elementor plugin instance. Well, now we have an instance of the Elementor plugin, and now we'll get the widgets manager out of there. We're gonna register widget type, and now we'll new up our slideshow navigation widget, which we haven't written yet. And with that, we can go on to the next part. Now let's quickly create the widget file we just made. So we create a new folder, widgets, in which we're going to create a PHP file, slideshow navigation of PHP. We're going to open PHP text and nothing more here. Next thing, I told you we're going to skip this one, so I'm going to comment it. Now let's configure the widget styles. Public function widget styles. WP enqueue such hard words, right? Style, slideshow, navigation. We're gonna get the location, so plugins, URL, CSS, slideshow, navigation, CSS. That's where we're gonna get it. And let's also create that. Let's create a new folder, CSS. And we're gonna name it like this. File, slideshow, voila. That's that. Now we still need our widget scripts. Public function, widget scripts. That's this function over here. WP enqueue, WP register script. Also called slideshow navigation. Oh, I see I have a typo navigation. Let's make sure we do that like this. And let's get that file. So plugin, here, URL, file. This gets the root plugin file, and from there we will get our script. This will be in the build folder, and it's called index.js. Now, this file will be dependent on two things. First of all, jQuery. So the script will only be loaded once jQuery is loaded, because we're going to make use of jQuery to fetch certain things from the DOM. And another thing which is important is Elementor Frontend. We want to have this loaded so that our JavaScript data stream between PHP and JavaScript works. This is what Elementor Frontend does for us. Okay, so all the Java work is done, and now we're getting to the funny part, which the fun part, not the funny part, sorry. And this is how we're going to write our plugin. So as you can see, I am now in the slideshow-navigation.php file, which is in the widgets folder. This is probably created sometime before, and in here I'm gonna write a class slideshow navigation widget extends Elementor widget base. We have to extend the widget base because we are gonna override some functions here, and we're gonna rely heavily on the parent class, and yeah, this way Elementor knows how to load in everything. So first of all, we're gonna give our widget a name. This is more like a slug, but the method is name, so it's public function get name, and it will return a slug slideshow navigation. After that, we're gonna write title, public function get title, and this will return a more user-friendly title, standalone navigation, which is translatable in our text domain, but because I'm lazy, I'm just gonna look for it here. Yeah, voila. The name can be translated. Next up, we're gonna add an icon. Get icon. And I'm gonna enter this one. So this is again an Elementor icon, a navigation horizontal. Now we're gonna add categories to which our widget belongs. Get categories. And do you remember that we made our own custom category right here? So you can copy the slug you've added here, return an array, because a widget can be more categories. I could go here for basic and pro, but I won't do that because we have our own category. Now I noticed I forgot one very important part, and that is in our main plugin file. I forgot to run it. So we still have to, at the bottom, run the instance. This is the instance we created over here. Oh. All right, now we'll write down which scripts our plugin depends on, get script depends, and our plugin is dependent on the script we entered here, slideshow navigation. Otherwise, our plugin won't function. All of these methods can be found in the Elementor documentation, and there is an explanation of what they do exactly, but I think most of them are written in a way that they explain themselves. Next, we're going to register some controls. Public function register controls. First, we're going to start controls section, which will have an ID of content section, and which will have the options, a label, settings, again translatable via our text domain, and the type will be, that's not correct, the type will be the top, sorry, will be of type Elementor controls manager top content. This will dictate what it will be if we enter it. So like this, we enter it. Right now we will have a tab content here. You can do a tab style, tab layout, tab design. I think there's all sorts of possibilities. I think there's 6 sorts of possibilities in total, but you can find them in the Elementor documentation. We're going to use tab content, this one. I'm forgetting something, this, okay. Now we're going to add a control itself, add control, an ID of use section ID. This one is, you can set by yourself, you can choose this, and with the options label, sorry, enter ID. This is where users will enter the ID if they choose to use an ID, CSS ID. Again, some translation. It's a lot of typing, but we'll get there eventually. The type of this field will be a switcher, Elementor controls manager switcher. If the label is on, we will output yes. If the label is off, we will output no. And in this case, I think it's better if we use the following function: escape HTML, and then like this. So just to be sure we don't get that. Let's add a description. You can enter a custom ID, or you could let the plugin find the nearest slider. Voila. Now we're gonna make this setting frontend available. What this means is that the JavaScript we're going to write in the future will be aware of changes made to this function, made to this control. So we can adapt our JavaScript, we can do custom things in JavaScript based on the setting which is set here. So I'm going to set this to true. The return value is going to be yes. And the default is no. Voila. Now we need one more control. Add control. Slide ID. And this will be an optional control. What I mean by that is this control has a condition. And we'll get to that in a sec. So another label. Section ID, section or container ID, text domain. This will be of type Elementor controls manager text. Voila. Input type will be text. Right, correct PHP. Let's put a placeholder in there. Header image. Give it a description. Enter the section / container ID, for example, header image. Oops. This function, this control will also be front-end available. And now the cool part, this has a condition. Use section ID, which is this control. You can see they're highlighted together. Yes. So only if section ID is I've written a mistake. I'm not writing JavaScript. So only if this control is set to yes, this control will show. Now we have to end the control section. And now let's have a look at what we've created. To have a look, we first have to create an index file in the build folder. I'm gonna do some setup for the JavaScript, but we're not actually gonna write any JavaScript yet. So first of all, I will have create a source folder which will contain an index.js file. Now we have to open a terminal and start an npm package. So npm init. Package name, yes, standalone slideshow is good. Version is 1.1. Description, we don't want to write the description right now. Our entry point is index.js right here in the source folder. Test command, we don't need that. The Git repository, not yet. Keywords, not yet. Author is me, but you know that. License, I'm not interested. This is okay for me. Voila. Now we have a package.json. Now I'm going to install a certain package, which is, let me search for it. npm install WordPress scripts. This is created by WordPress and will give us all the things we need to create our custom widget. I'm gonna let this run for a while and I'll get back to you when this is done, because this may take a while. Okay, so our npm has finished installing, and now we have a node module folder, and we can go to our package.json and we have to add some scripts. I'm gonna copy these over. I will provide these in the description. So the ones we're mainly interested in is build and start. Build is just gonna run the build script and stop, nothing more. Start is when you're developing, you can run npm run start. It will look for source index and it will generate a build index file, which is readable by the browser. This file isn't readable by the browser. So, and if we make any changes here, so const start is up, voila, we press save, it's gonna have an error. Missing initialization in const declaration is maybe this, like this, voila. And this will create a modern browser readable file, which we have hooked into our plugin. With that setup, we can now normally load Elementor again, but I'm still looking at an error. Which I'll have to figure out first. Alright, so I figured out that what the error was. It's a typo. So I've write controls manager instead of controls manager. Let's see if we have more managers. No, normally it should work right now. Typos are a developer's worst nightmare. It came back successful, that's that good. This is loading, so right now we have my widget here. Sorry, and we have our setting sections which we have written. So we can enter the ID, and if we click yes, .id content shows up. That's what we have done over here. This is the first setting, and this is the second setting, which is dependent on the other one. Nice. Now the only thing that's left in our plugin class is to write the render functions. Protected function render. I'm gonna copy over some things in here so we don't have to write it again. So what it will do, it will render a wrapper div, which will contain the wrapper carousel, the standalone web slider, and some of the classes we will use to style our widget. Then we write another function, protected function, content template. This function is how the widget will render in the Elementor editor. So if this function dictates how it's rendered when you're actually viewing the website like this, the content template function dictates how it will look out when you're in the editor modus. But for our use case, we just have the exact same thing. And with that, our slider navigation widget class is done. All right, let's dig into the final part of this tutorial, and that is the JavaScript part. So make sure you have npm run start running. Go into your index.js file, which is in the source folder. Don't go into the build, go into the source. And let's start a new class here. So I'm gonna write class slideshow navigation handler extends Elementor modules frontend handlers base with a capital B. And this is our class. So we can choose this. This is something we make up, but we have to make sure to extend all the Elementor module frontend handlers base because we need some functionality from this class to make everything work. So there is an onInit function which we can override. Let's call super onInit. So if anything else is called in the parent onInit, this is also called here, and then we're gonna call this update slider ID content. This function will run once when the handler is created, like this. We're also gonna write an onElement change function, which will capture the property name. What this does is, if we in our backend are changing these elements, or we're putting yes or no here, or we're typing here, every time we do this, this function will run. We're gonna check if use section ID is property name or slider ID is property name. Then we will also call this update slider ID content. We still have to write this function though. So below that, let's write that function. This is the biggest function we're gonna write. So I have a function. This is not gonna accept anything. And in here, we're gonna check if we already got the content wrapper set. This is a constant we can set on the class. So we'll create a constant widget unique selector. And this is gonna be template with literal div data ID is $sign. This get ID, this is all internal. We have to put some quotes around that. And then we get a slideshow navigation. And then we'll set the content wrapper of this class to this document.query selector widget unique selector. What this is going to do is we're going to build a selector, which is just a string, and we're going to capture this class that's in here. I'll show you. Also, there's a content wrapper. we now refresh our page, let's open the console. Okay, it's moaning that the CSS file can be found, but that's because we haven't hooked it up yet. Good. Now, if we want to make sure we can actually run things in here and see them in the console, we first have to hook it into the window. So we're going to do go outside of the class. So you can see the class is the yellow bracket. I'm going outside jQuery window on Elementor Frontend init. We open an arrow function. First I gotta put on here. Constant, we got add handler, which is a function which accepts an element, which does some Elementor magic, hocus pocus, Elementor Frontend, elements handler, add handler, and then we'll put our class we written in here with a second parameter, the element. Now we only need to add that action, we need to combine it with our PHP, and that's this one going to do. So Elementor frontend.hooks.add action, and then the action we're going to hook into is frontend element, ready. And now we go into our slideshow class and we look at the name, the slug we gave it. So we named it slideshow navigation, slideshow navigation.default, we're going to pass it the function we've written over here, and with this we now should be able to run the class we have here, and we have it coupled against our PHP class. That's all in this function. I've noticed another small mistake we have to correct. So in the widget styles enqueue, which is in the standalone slide nav file, I've put the -- file in here, but it has to be inside the plugins URL function, otherwise it won't find the CSS navigation. So you have to correct that. Alright, we have two small typos to correct. So if you see here, there's a little issue. I have Elementor frontend the elements handler, which should be the elements handler. Handler is not going to work. And over here I have written ID with capital I and small cap D. We have to put two capitals here, and if we do that, we can now refresh our Elementor, wait for it to load, and it's gonna console log light right here our content wrapper. Great. Alright, so now we have to figure out how many slides our slider has. Const amount of slides is this dot fetch amount of slides. This function doesn't exist yet, so we're gonna write it down below. First of all, I'm gonna show you how we can get settings from our Elementor settings over here, this settings into our JavaScript, and this is done via this function. So const use section ID is this dot get element settings use section ID. And what this is going to do is this get element settings is a function we have available in the API of Elementor, and we're going to fetch this field, this over here, which is this one. Yes or no? Now we have the section ID. We're gonna instantiate a swiper wrapper. Which is cool about Elementor is that since a version, I don't know which one, they have allowed external developers like ourselves to hook into the swiper instances. So they're not locked away, they are available, but you just need a way to get them. So what I'm gonna do is if your section ID is undefined or your section ID is empty, then our swiper wrapper, it's going to be jQuery e-container. We're gonna look into an Elementor container. Find swiper wrapper. Right now, we're looking into e-container, which is an Elementor container. This is not going to work for sections, which is prior Elementor versions. If you have a prior Elementor version, you have to figure out which is the class of the slider container right here. So it's going to be my Elementor widget container, for example, or see, it's not. So here it's e-container column. This will be something else if you're using sections. So you're going to be using that in your jQuery. So in this case, so if our section ID is undefined, use section ID is undefined, or it's empty, we're going to use the container, which means in here, if it's like this, set to no, the plugin, I'm gonna show it here. So if it's set to no, the plugin is gonna look for a slider in the DOM, not for a specific ID, but for a slider in the DOM. Else, which means if a section ID is set, the swiper wrapper will be jQuery, and we're gonna construct our own selector. So it's a hashbang, or because we're fetching an ID and I'm not able to write a hashbang. So hashbang plus this get element settings, slider ID, plus space swiper wrapper. What this is going to do is it's going to check for a container which has a certain slider ID, and it's gonna fetch the swiper wrapper in that thing. So right here, it's gonna look for this. It has an ID normally, but there's so much things here. So here is an ID header image, and it's gonna look for the swiper wrapper in there. And from that swiper wrapper, we'll be able to fetch the swiper instance. I told you this was the hard part. So, and then we have to make sure we don't have any JS errors whilst we're finding the ID. So that's going to be return swiper wrapper.length is 0. If it is 0, we return 0. If it's not 0, we're going to get the swipe wrapper. We're going to get the first index. We're going to look into the children, and we're going to get their length. And this is just going to return how many slides we have. So we want to fetch the amount of slides, and if we have a swipe wrapper, and we're going to return the children. So in this case, we find the swipe wrapper, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 children. So 7 amount of slides, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's great. And that's that. This is just going to fetch everything. All right, so next up in our update slider ID content function, we're going to create a new swiper instance. And we're going to populate that field. So to do this, we're going to write the SetTimeout function, because when Elementor initially loads, this is going to load, but the swiper instance isn't accessible yet. We have to wait until Elementor is fully loaded. We can do that with an Elementor on, but that doesn't always work. So I'm just going to do it with a SetTimeout, which takes 1 second, and that works. It's not the best workaround, but it's a workaround. So we're going to SetTimeout, arrow function, const use section ID is this dot get element section use section ID. Then we're gonna instantiate the variable to put the image carousel in. So let image carousel, and now we have to populate the swiper instance and the image carousel. So same thing as before. If your section ID is undefined, or your section ID is nothing, we don't put a comment, but we console.log, we're using ID to find. Sorry, we are not using ID to find slider. So our image carousel, which we have created here, will be jQuery. Again, same thing, e-container, find swiper container. So this is just gonna give us the swiper instance. Else, if not, console.log, we are using the ID. Now we are using it. So again, this is a bit of a build-up, but it's gonna be image carousel. Oh, is jQuery hashbang plus this got get element section slider ID. This is what we've entered right here, slider ID. So this will create hashbang slider ID 1 plus base swiper container. You can see there's a difference. Here we get the, sorry, that's not correct what I'm doing. I have to put my semicolon here. So in here we're fetching the swiper wrapper because we want to know the amount of slides. But in here we're fetching the swiper container because we want the swiper instance. So swiper wrapper is this, the amount of slides. Swiper container is this because this already belongs to the swiper instance. After we've done that, we can set our swiper instance, which we have set outside the function here. Swiper instance is image carousel.data swiper, and this is just some Elementor swiper API stuff. So we have created the instance here, and we get the carousel and we get the data swiper from it, and this instantiate the instance. I will show you console.log swiper instance. Let's see what we got here. I think I forgot something in a SetTimeout function. Yeah, undefined. I still have to put 1 second, of course. Don't forget that. You can see it's undefined here, the swiper instance, but we're not using ID. Right here, we're indeed not using ID. If we click it, we are not using ID. There's still an issue there, but we'll figure that out. First, gonna see if I've yeah, it's because the instance isn't waited for. Yep, it seems I have some debugging to do. Right, I've done some debugging and I found the issue. So in the slideshow navigation.php file, I've made a typo. In the use section ID control, I've typed it like this, available. So this should be available. Because this was not available, this wasn't working either. So the use section ID was always null or undefined. So it was always running this function, which is not correct. So right now, if we save and we refresh, you can see that we are getting all the settings, which is 0, use section ID. If I enter it, it's going to give an error, but that's because we haven't entered anything here. But if we add it like this, slider 1, you can see a lot has happened. But what it does is, whilst we are typing, it is updating our section ID every time, and then it says we are using an ID to find the slider, and once we found it, we've got our swiper instance. Let's save. Now if we go to the front end, no, it's not going to do anything because we haven't printed the bullets yet. So that's our next step. But if you can see right now, I'm console logging the section, the settings here. Remove that. I'm also going to remove this. But if you want to see, we can see we have entered slider ID and the use is on yes, and we found swiper instance, which is this one, which is great. On to the next part. Let's see where we are. We found the ID, we've coupled the instance. Now we need to do something. Now we need to print the bullets. So to do that, we're gonna write in here in the update slider ID function. Let's create a constant bullets, which is bullets. Sorry, keyboard hanging. This.construct HTML, which we will write, and this one is going to take the amount of slides which we have fetched before right here. We're finally going to use them. After we have created the HTML, we're going to set this.content wrapper.inner HTML to the bullets. So what this is going to do is this.content wrapper is this part we fetched over here, and we're going to set it's going to fetch this part, and it's going to set the inner HTML over here to the bullets we created. For the bullets, I've already created a function which I'm going to copy in. So after our fetch amount of slide bullet, I'm going to copy this function, which is construct HTML. It's going to take an amount of bullets. We're initializing an empty string for I, where I is 1, because we start counting from 1, not from 0 here. And I is less than amount of slides plus 1, because we added one here, not here, and then I plus plus. So for every slide we have, we're going to create a bullet. And a bullet is just a span with an ID if it's not 1. So if it's not active, we're going to put it active. With a tab index of 0, area label, go to slide 1 or whatever, and then we return the bullets, and this should normally give us bullets. Make sure you name it construct HTML in big capitals, not in the small, which I copied it over. Make sure the function is like this, otherwise it won't work. Now we don't see anything yet, but that's because we don't have any CSS. If we go in here, you can see our bullets are here, but they're not showing. For the CSS, I have written some CSS. I'm not going to go over that. I'm just going to copy it in here. As a CSS, it's not much. I put it in a Pastebin, so you got it. And if with that done, we could refresh, and normally we should see our bullets, which are here, and they are not doing anything right now, but we've got them. That's great. So right now we need to make our bullets clickable, and we're gonna do that by writing another jQuery function in our update slider content. We're gonna write another jQuery body dot on click. If we click on the bullet slide, we're gonna call a function which has an event. We're gonna prevent the default action. This is just common sense. Then we're gonna fetch the current slide ID. That is jQuery e.target, which will get the current clicked bullet e.target. And we get the attribute data slide ID. If you remember correctly, in our bullets we have made it like this. So we have a bullet, and we give it this data slide ID with the current index of the bullet. Show you in the front end. Every bullet has data slide ID 4, data slide ID 5, data slide ID 6. Based on this ID, we will be able to go to the slide we wanted. Okay, so now based on that slide ID, we'll do another jQuery call. We'll get bullet slide standalone swiper pagination bullet active dot remove class standalone swiper pagination bullet active. What this does is it's gonna get the active bullet, and it's gonna remove the class active because we pressed somewhere and we have to make another one active. That's what we're gonna do right now. So jQuery this dot add class standalone swiper pagination bullet active. I hope I have not made any typos here. And after all of this, we're gonna get the swiper instance. We're gonna slide to slide ID -1. This is because the swiper instance starts counting from 0 and we start counting from 1. So the swiper instance, we fetched it over here. It's still console log. I'm gonna first get it. This is from the swiper API. I googled this. This is how I know this. And normally when I run this, I should be able to see everything work. Okay, let's wait. We're using the slide ID. And we still have an error. jQuery add class is not a function. That's because class is with capital C. Let's run it. The build reruns it. Okay, and we fixed it. The cool thing about this now is that this is loosely coupled against the slider. So what we could do in our Elementor is we could put this here, in between here. So there's another element in between. Update. Right now, if we see here, we can still control our slides, which is pretty cool if you ask me. Okay, so right now there's one more thing I want to show you. At the moment when our slide changes, like you've seen right now, the bullet isn't changing, which isn't very nice because right now we're on slide 3 and our navigation is still on slide 1. Even if I go through it with my mouse, like dragging like this, it's not going through. How we solve this is using the following. So in our SetTimeout function, when we get our swiper instance, we're gonna listen for an on event in our swiping instance. So on slide change function e. Okay, voila. So when a slide is changed, we're gonna get the bullet from. So the bullet is swiper instance active index +1. So we know that's the bullet index truly. So swiper instance is what we got from the DOM. Active index is a swiper API variable. So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna copy over this because we're almost gonna do the same. jQuery. We're first gonna remove the active class and then we're gonna not gonna fetch this, but we're gonna fetch span data slide ID is post, and like this bullet index, sorry. So what this is going to do, it's going to look for a bullet with data slide ID. So when a slide goes to slide 2, for example, it's going to look in our navigation for a data slide ID 2 and it's going to make that one active. Let's save and let's run. So right now let's wait till the slide changes. I think it's 5 seconds, voila, and our bullet changed too. If we go to the slide with our mouse, like this, voila, which is pretty cool if you ask me. And that's it for the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something. It's a pretty complex concept, but I hope I've done a good job explaining. I tried to keep the errors I made into the video, not edit them out, because I want to show you that it's logical. You make errors, especially typos. I think if I recall correctly, I made like 5 or 6 typos, which most of my debugging is finding typos. Well, if you enjoyed it, click subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. I would appreciate it a lot. And thanks for watching. Bye.